Hi, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to another edition of the Women Who Lead. So, today, what we're going to be talking about is really how to detox your life and remove the noise and stay on track in 2025. So, everyone, hi, my name is Uche Maple. I'm the president of Noteworthy Consulting. We are a leadership and professional development consulting firm that helps engineering organizations to empower their organization by creating a great environment for team engagement, team dynamics, and overall increased productivity for high performing teams. So, um, one of the things that is happening right now is the reality is we have so much information, and how are we really able to cut the noise and stay on track? I just posted another video that talks about how you can remove social media from your life so that you can have better goals for your future. But one thing that I'm realizing now is that the pandemic has had devastating effects on our learning. Period. I just think everyone has been affected by it. And I know for me personally, when it was a point where I would read something and I couldn't even remember what I read. And I'm like, this is not normal for me because I have a very, very good memory, I would say. And where I'm able to read something maybe once or twice, and I'm able to remember it without writing down. And what I found was that, the retention of information was depleting very quickly, and which was prohibiting me from being very good at things that I do. So I'm having to make modification and changes. And one of the things I did was I had to detox my life. And detoxing my life was removing everything that did not belong. And then I implemented a couple of hacks. I don't even want to call them hacks. I call them ways to think so that that can help me be better. So I was again researching, and I saw this um, article that came up, and I thought it was interesting. I was reading it, and it was saying like how the pandemic has had devastating impacts on learning. And they're really talking about, students, what would it take to help students catch up? And I have children, and when I was reading this article, I was like, this just isn't for students. This is for all of us. We're all having impacts in terms of how we're learning, and what is happening to us. And some of the things that they were just talking about is really the way that we learn now is different, and how information is being retained so that students, and this includes all of us, how they're learning differently, and how can they catch up. I mean, they did, they were doing statistics in terms of reading, in terms of mathematics capabilities, as they're doing assessments, like where are students now, you know and the numbers are there, but it doesn't make sense because these are our next generation. And even us today is, how are we positioning ourselves so that we can also retain information that is advantageous for us? Everyone can't hire someone to just take diction and just remember stuff, right? So what are we doing to make sure that we are learning and not just learning, retaining information? So I took a psych class, and I learned a lot. Love psychology. Plan on getting my PhD in psychology, and loved it a lot. Let me just say this: psych is not an easy class. I took my class in 7 weeks, and baby, I was like in that instructor's emailing her, messaging her in her office, like, I'm trying to understand how I can do this. And when I say this, I mean being able to retain this amazing information so that I can take quiz and tests, because it was a 7 week class. And things that normally are not difficult for me became difficult for me. Like my cognitive was being exercised almost every day. And so what I'm going to share with you is some of the things that I learned in the book, so that you don't think that it's coming from me. It's coming from the book on terms of how I can impact my learning. And this is stuff that, it's not just it's not things like you just remember, because just like multiplication facts, I know my multiplication facts all the time. I was always winning in third grade. I remember that we used to do multiplication tests, and how many can you get in 60 seconds or 30 seconds, and I was always winning. And we always won popcorn at the end. To be honest with you, I felt so bad after a while that I was like, maybe I shouldn't win, but I think I was still winning nevertheless. But they listed four key things that we can do to how we can really impact our learning in a way to help us in today's environment with so much information that's coming out, and really how to cut out the noise so that we can stay on track in 2025. I don't know about you, but there are so many amazing things that I want to do with the life that I have on this earth. And I want to be very proficient and efficient and effective in how I show up every day now. And make sure let me say this, shout out, be sure to like and subscribe as you are on here. Every support matters. I'm really just trying to, my goal right now is to get to 1,000 subscribers. And if you can help out with that, when you can help out with that, that will be great as we're moving forward. So, four key things they talked about on how we're learning to learn, really relearning things so that we can remember and retain this information. It says study actively so that you can learn effectively. One, study actively so that you can learn effectively. What does that mean? So when we are reading actively, like when you're reading something, you really want to make sure you review the goals. You know how like and I'm not talking about like romance books, novels, or anything like that. I'm even talking about just regular books. When we're reading it, they have these learning goals here. And let me be honest with you. When I was in my psych class, I was not reading my learning goals. It wasn't until the professor, she said, Uche, the way that you can, the key to passing not just the quizzes, but these tests, she said, read the learning goals. And if you can answer the goals, then you can answer the content. Baby, when I did that, I was like, oh, this is simple, because it gave me a framework on how I study and learn versus I'm just reading. And I think one of the biggest things I learned was that when I'm just reading something without having objectives of what I'm trying to learn, it doesn't help me at all, because I'm just highlighting things that I think are important that are not important. But those learning objectives is like, after you read this chapter, these are the things that you're going to learn. And if I couldn't learn, when I would go back and like try to answer, if I couldn't answer it, I knew what to go back to. So that in a way is really making sure you have objectives on what you're trying to learn while you are doing this. It talks about how you can outline the text. Right now things are in not just in physical copy, but you have electronic copy. And let me say this, I love the electronic copies of textbooks because they have videos there. They have quizzes you can take that explain things better than just on paper. The videos itself, when you are for textbooks, are amazing. So if you're reading a book and they do have like videos and stuff on there, I would highly suggest you do that. The second thing too, it says, go beyond just listening in class. Like we want to make sure we take notes, discuss the ideas, and ask and answer questions. This is really important. This is why they say, hey, when you're in a class, when you're learning something with other people, this is even at work, when you're learning new capabilities, when you are trying to solve a complex problem, is when people are giving you information of what they need you to provide a solution for, you go beyond than just listening what they're saying, right? You're listening for what's not being said. And you take notes, you're discussing ideas, and you have to ask and answer questions. I believe that, when people are asked, one of the best ways to learn something It's in addition to asking, but when people ask questions, it's so that you can answer. You're like, yo, wait a minute. I know this information. I never forget this. So, um, maybe about 10 years ago, I was a systems engineering manager for one of our robotic systems at a different company at a company. And I never forget my systems engineering manager at the time. I was system lead over this particular thing. And I think maybe my first 6 months I was learning, just learning. And I never forget this. I was in his office and someone had came in and asked a question, and he was like thinking about it, and I was like, oh, it's blah 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 blah. And then I'll never forget this. I was like, yes, I'm learning. I got this. And it was so funny. And he was just looking at me, and I was like, I'm sorry, I was excited because I was able to answer a question. So that's a way for you to learn, is by answering questions, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the more you speak, the more you seek, the more you gain. Okay. So the second thing you can do is um, find examples so that you can relate concepts. So, things that are similar to things. So, for example, ideas, apply ideas to life. So, they were talking about how to do positive and negative reinforcement. Listen, I didn't know this. Like, I was always doing negative reinforcement, like you got a spanking. But one thing that they talked about was that you can do positive reinforcement where um, you're taking away something and you're adding something. I'm trying to remember what it is. I got to get my book. And I thought that was such a great way on how, for my children. So, for example, my son, when I needed him to clean up his room. And instead of like nagging him all the time, I'll say, hey, if your room isn't clean, instead of me, like threatening him with something, I would say, hey, I'm taking $25 out your account. And he was like, what? And I would take money. So every week, if I had to do this, I would take money away from his account. And let me tell you this, he kept his room clean. And I was like, this is such a great idea. How come no one told me this? So it was really applying what I learned to everyday life. And that has actually made all the difference in term for that particular example. So when we are learning things and we can apply it to our lives, it makes a difference. And that's another way to retain information, because you're applying what you learned. Okay. Uh, the third thing is explain ideas so that you can understand them better. Rephrase information in your own words. So when someone says something, like, if I'm learning something, or even if I'm hearing something from a client, just so that I can understand, I'm like, so what I hear you saying is this. And then they're like, yes or no. And then we take time where both of us, one, that I can get a better understanding, because one, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying so that I can meet your needs. And two, for the client too, is making sure that they're explaining it so that they can get the best product. Right. So as a systems engineer, I was a systems engineer really maybe I've been a system engineer all my life. Right. So I started out, for those of you who don't know, I got my undergrad in mechanical engineering, where I was working on the production floor, shop floor control. For those of you know I'm talking about, you're like, oh, okay. And then 2 to 3 years after that, I went into the systems engineering area, where I was looking at requirements, analysis, all that stuff. So it was great as a mechanical engineer working in that industry. And one of the things is that what we say is, I work, from a requirement standpoint, where we get what the customer wants and then we verify it. What they say is that when you are verifying the requirements, is did you build the right system? Did you build the system right? And then you validate is, did you build the right system? And I say that that's important is because when we are communicating with people, we want to make sure that we listen to what they say. Like, okay, you're telling me you want this, right? This is the right information. But when they come back and validate what we've done, we want to make sure that we've done it right. So it's a simple nuance, but it's a big difference. And as we are trying to learn things and remember things, we want to be able to explain the ideas so that we can understand them better. And then the third thing, I mean, the last thing, the fourth thing is learn from other people how you can think more deeply. Um, One best way is when you're talking to people, you can always ask, well, who do you know did this very successfully? What were some of the things that they did? What were some of the traits that they had? There is nothing wrong with emulating people who have done it successfully. We often think that we have to reinvent the wheel. You don't. And by knowing these things is how you cut out the noise so that you can stay on track, especially in 2025. Because baby, the way it started, we got noise every day. And to be honest with you, I don't have the time or the headache or close those doors, close the noise so that I can stay on track. But that's one way is how we can learn from other people is by really getting an understanding of who was successful in this and what did they do, and so that you can characterize things that they did great. You can use that things that they didn't. You don't need it. And then also too is talk with other people about the information that they received and and how they were able to connect that information to their lives. Um, Oftentimes, I know my son, he's on games, and when he is a deep thinker, he'll come upstairs and he's like, Mom, what about, I was on the game and I saw this, and what makes that different? And we'll have conversation because he's trying to he's trying to process this into the real world on how he can best utilize it. So those are the four ways on how we can how we really can begin to learn and remember very important information that can take us from where we are today to where we want to be in the future and what we want to do in 2025. All right. Everyone have a great one. Talk to you later. Bye.